Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do most Sundays. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below the video, and that's where we pick from each week. I think stuff's written down 22, 23, 24, actually, this past week. And thank you guys so much for participating in this and asking such great questions. Sometimes I'll pick back up one that's being asked a lot over a short period of time. And so, you know, there may be one that I've answered fairly recently, but for the most part, other questions I haven't answered in a long time or have never answered. So thanks again for that. The open garden tickets are over on my website at horttube.com /shop. And it's linked right down below this video for the tickets. The tickets are, we have 3 openings, Friday evening, Saturday morning, and Saturday afternoon on June 20th and 21st. A lot of tickets have already been sold, so thank you guys so much for doing that. Go ahead and purchasing them so far in advance. Helps us for planning, and we're gonna have, again, we're gonna have a lot of giveaways there, and some of the proceeds from this are going to the J.C. Ralston Arboretum and the Gardens of Southeastern North Carolina, where we're doing that project at that garden, which we'll be getting back into this spring. What else from that? If you're local, Raleigh, pick Friday evening if you would, or somewhere where it's easy for you. If it's easy for you to come on Friday evening, come on Friday evening. That's the lowest ticket sales, which is what I figured. But the people who are traveling, probably it's better for them to have Saturday to come. So if you can come on Friday evening and you're local, do that, please. Pick Friday evening. Let's see, and we're going to have a list of resources soon for hotel accommodations, restaurants, those kinds of things. I'll do that on one of the Sunday videos. I'll just put it down at the bottom of the video, maybe next week when we'll do that. Let's see, what else from this past week? We did a seed starting video on Friday. Well, it wasn't much of a seed starting video. It was more having everything in place for seed starting, because we're a little early seed starting. We're actually down in the Keys, and there's a question about the dogs traveling in just a minute. We made our way down here for a few days. We're on Sugarloaf Key, and where we stay up here in Sugarloaf Key, there's this like abandoned road that we can bike on, and we can actually go from bike from the other side to one side and bike from this side to here where I'm standing. You can see there used to be a bridge here, and I don't know if it got washed out in a hurricane or if it was taken down intentionally so larger boats could come through here. But this it's a really beautiful cut. The water is crystal clear here. A fun place to bike. And then again, we'll go around the other side of it. We're down here for a few days biking, actually, a lot of it around the Keys, which is kind of fun. And the northern part of Sugarloaf here is where the Key Deer Reserve is, or preserve is, where the endangered little key deer are right up the street from us. Probably some on this side as well of one, but for the most part, they're on the other side over there, and there's a lot of them. They're endangered and have been endangered for a long time, but they've really come back a lot. And in the evenings, we can ride our bikes over there down the main road, and they're just, you know, they come out in the evenings on the side of the road eating grass. Kind of neat. Let's see, let's get to some questions, and I've got some no-see-ums or something trying to chew on me here this morning. So I might make this briefer than usual. I don't know. They're kind of tough right this second. Let's see. One of the questions was about sowing summer jewel salvias. How many seeds per cell? A lot of the small seed things, when we're seeding them, I end up with more than one. They germinate at a pretty high rate, so you can probably do 1 per cell and get away with it. But we probably end up doing 2 on virtually everything, sometimes 3 by accident, and then we'll thin them later. If you get 2 seedlings up in the same cell, whichever one's more vigorous we'll keep, and we'll cut the other one out pretty quickly. Do that sooner the better if you're going to thin your seedlings later. And then how do you handle small seeds? Steph does most of the seeding. A lot of times I'll make a video about seeding, and then I'll do 1 tray, and then she ends up doing the rest of the trays while I edit that video or whatever else. You know, however we're managing this together. But she'll take them and put them out on a plate, like a white plate, so she can see them. and then take them and you use the tip of your finger and just collect them that way on the plate. That seems to be one of the easier ways where you can actually physically see them and make sure you're only getting 1 or 2 on your fingertip before you drop it into the cell. We'll definitely have more seed starting videos as time goes on. I think I answered that back there. I had to abandon that spot pretty quickly. I looked down and there were like 40 no-see-ums on both legs. It was like, okay, time to leave that spot. We're here in the same exact spot a couple times now, and there was none. So I think they've gotten a lot of rain. I mean, a whole lot of rain. Plus, it's early in the morning, so I'm guessing the moisture. Now that the sun's coming up, there may be less of them. Let's see. So somebody has increased the size of the beds in their landscape to the point where hand watering is not practical, and they wanted to know about putting in drip irrigation. So they've always been told to water in the morning or the evening and not midday when they're overhead watering. Does it matter as much with drip irrigation? No, definitely would matter less. The main thing to know about plant growth is most of it occurs at night, and you want to go into the evening with your plants moist. I've never liked the idea of having your plants go into the night dry and then watering early in the morning like that. It was like never made any sense to me when the plants do most of their growing at night. So the main thing is that 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the evening during the summertime, you can reach down and there's moisture around your plants at that time, because that's the time that they're going to actually be doing their growing and need to have moisture available during the nighttime hours. And again, but not over top of the plant if we can avoid it. But it's humid in the south, and it rains. We get evening thunderstorms all the time, and those evening thunderstorms end up being beneficial because a lot of times they're bringing nitrogen down to our plants, which are helping them, which are actually helping them grow. She had done that one as 1A and 1, so we're still on number 2. Let's see. Can I use sawdust as mulch? I've answered this in the past, and you can definitely use sawdust as mulch, no problem. But keep in mind that sawdust the lumber was dried before it was, before it went through the mill. And because of that drying, it's missing the moisture that will allow it to help it break down quickly in the garden. And so what's going to happen is it's just going, if you're trying to use sawdust in the place of like wood chips, where you're trying to really ignite the soil, it's not going to work as well or as fast. So it'll work for mulch where we're trying to have a decorative mulch that lasts a long time, but it won't do the thing that the wood chips will do, where it has all the green parts in it and the moisture in it and everything that just kind of like, it's a fire that ignites in the garden. So keep that in mind. Sawdust is just a dry version of that, and breaks down much slower. For the first time ever on the road, I've had to abandon outdoor filming. Just getting eaten up out there. They've gotten so much rain, a lot of rain. We've had a lot of rain yesterday while we were here, but moved the operation inside the van. Holly is down here at my feet. Griffin's back here behind the camera, so is Steph. And we'll move on to number 3, which is actually number 4. This person has a fairly minor slope overall with compacted clay, and they're using wood chips and leaves and kind of doing the same thing that we're doing at the house, and they're trying to get water to be able to infiltrate the ground better. They wanted to know how long it had taken for us to get to the point where our garden, because I put up the video 2 Fridays ago, just holding a water hose in one spot and just showing how long it would actually take for water to actually run, how much water it would take for water to actually run off of the property now. And it would take a long time and a lot of water. It's capable of absorbing tons and tons of water. It's 4 years in the process, but I also said that we weren't at absolute zero. I actually think that if you're maintaining a place, just mowing off weeds for a long period of time, and you're not putting a lot of traffic on it, not a lot of foot traffic, that it's not like I was starting from zero, because that property had basically had 70 some years of just mowing the weeds down. And I'm sure that those had an impact on breaking that soil up somewhat and slightly restoring it back to, its original shape. So I wasn't starting from zero, but a lot of you may be moving into a new house where machinery has just really compacted it. It may take a little while longer for that soil to respond to the moisture that it's collecting and other things that are happening in it, and loosen up. It can take a long time. Those machines can sink soil feet You know, they don't even realize it's happening. You know, but they can, you know, they take all the air out of the soil using those, you know, heavy equipment and tires. And then they wanted to, ultimately their water runs to one corner, and they wanted to know if they should gravel in that corner. So, you know, those are the types of questions I would have a hard time answering, you know, without seeing it. But it might be an opportunity to put a rain garden, to have the final spot in your garden be a rain garden where you can have a maintainable space that can be the last place for water to actually go in the ground before it ultimately leaves your property. So you may want to look into that. And some of the municipalities around the country have funds available to help you install a rain garden. Raleigh had a program for that. Somebody said, how should I prune my crepe myrtle? Steph and I are going to find a crepe myrtle somewhere that we can prune this winter and actually show crepe myrtle pruning. But I'll be honest with you, I don't care whether people butcher their crepe myrtles. You know, a lot of crepe myrtles get planted so close to houses and in bad places under power lines and other things that sometimes that crepe murder, sawing them off in the wintertime approach is necessary and planned a lot of times by landscapers, because, a landscaper in a commercial property, in a shopping center, they're planting those crepe myrtles to last like 20, 25 years, and they're going to come out of the ground and they're going to put something else in that shopping center parking lot anyway. So they're planning on putting those crepe myrtles in, cutting them all to the same exact 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 feet or whatever during the wintertime, and then having them all come out identical and blooming with that kind of pom-pom, look that they have when you do the crepe myrtle, method of pruning. So there's a reason they're doing it. They want them all to look identical in that entire shopping center parking lot. And then homeowners have taken that as the way in which you prune, crepe myrtles for their long-term existence. So ultimately, they look weird. They get those strange knuckles on them. Landscapers, again, don't care because, they got a backhoe or a bobcat, or, they can jerk things out of the ground and put something else in, in a couple hours and move on with their days. Whereas you, with your crepe myrtle, is going to be rooted, they root in really, really well, and they're very difficult to reverse engineer out of the ground sometimes. But we will show what I would say is proper pruning of a crepe myrtle if you don't need to size control it. But if you need to size control it, you need to size control it. And some people do, because they're planted in places where a crepe myrtle that was planted that gets 30 or 35 feet tall, like Natchez, was planted in a spot that they really can't have it get more than 15 feet tall. So there you go. It's not something I've ever fretted about, but I know it's a funny thing in horticulture that people call it crepe murder and so on and so forth. But if something is temporary, ultimately, doesn't really matter as much. Where can you best put potash from a fireplace in the garden? I've answered these questions about disposing of things in the garden over the years, and the answer is always going to be just spread it far and wide. It'll have a positive impact if it's spread thinly throughout the garden, but possibly a negative impact if it's thrown all in one place over a long period of time. So that's the way I would handle that. It's just take it out and just sling it, across some stuff, an area, and then the next area and the next area, so that it's a net positive and not a problem, and just dumping it all in one place. And that's true with almost anything. Like if you had an old bag of fertilizer or something like that, or whatever, you need to get rid of it, just spread it far and wide, so you're not damaging, something with it in a small space. Just throw it out everywhere, a little bit everywhere. Let's see. So I had several people come to Mance, the trade show last weekend. Was that a week and a half ago now, as you're watching this? Several viewers that I saw on the floor at Mance. And one person who had come that I had never met before and then asked this question, that has been commenting on the videos for years and years and years. So it was great meeting Linus, and he ended up being able to talk to Buddy Lee. He actually has been on the hunt for that autumn moonstruck, the variegated Encore Azalea, but there's not a lot of availability out there. And he ended up being able to talk to Buddy, who invented them. So that was kind of that was kind of nice. And then we talked for a while, and then he asked a question on the video last week, besides Autumn Kiss, which is the Encore Azalea that's coming after Autumn Moonstruck, the variegated one. It's a beautiful pink and white flower. It's a really great looking plant overall. Great foliage, great habit. I've seen this plant for like 4 or 5 years now, while it was undergoing a review to find out if it was good as it seemed it was. He wanted to know what I saw other than that caught my eye at Mance, and he mentioned a couple things he had seen, down below last week's video. I just didn't get to go on the floor very much. Generally, I go up there and I help at a few trade shows a year. I help Southern Living Plant Collection, Encore Azalea, Better Boxwood, Butterfly Candy, Sunset Plant Collection, their spaces. I help them set up the spaces and I help them man the spaces a little bit. But generally, I get some time to go walk the show and really, and meet some people and catch up with old friends. And we end up getting content out of that on the road later. This year, because of the snowstorm that happened in Baltimore, we only had 4 people there, and I ended up staying in and around the space the entire time the show was open. So I saw friends here and there, but I really did not go and search the floor. So the answer to your question is I saw virtually nothing outside of where I was occupying for the 2 days that the show was open. So I wish I had spent a little more time on the floor walking around, but there are other shows, and I'll do that next time. But thanks for the question, because these trade shows are great places to go and see some of the up and coming, latest things, and some of the things that we'll bring to the show like that. We're trying to get growers to grow for later. They're things that may be 2 years before they're at retail. Okay. So somebody asked about using plants to shade roots of trees. The reason to, and the best, is it best to keep the foliage off the trunk? So yeah, if you have trees, I really don't want anything climbing on them, but I do like ground covers around them. And if you go over to a place like the Ralston, virtually every tree in the parking lot has some sort of ground cover growing right densely up under it, and they have no problem competing with one another like that. The tree is shading the roots is shading the ground covers. The ground covers are helping collect water and make sure there's no runoff. They're collecting leaves in their leaf litter and things so that stuff's not blowing off when the tree loses its leaves. So they're actually in a pretty symbiotic relationship. It does seem like one would be out competing the other or something like that. I don't allow anything to actually grow on the trees. And if you have low branching on the thing that you're planting the ground cover around, I don't want the ground cover, where we have that Scots pine out by the road, and we have a sedum growing around the base of it to keep the roots cool. I don't let that sedum actually get onto the foliage of the pine, because it'll do damage to it. And I don't want anything climbing the tree. We cut the English ivy off the oak that's behind the house, and there were several comments like, the ivy and the tree evolved together. The tree is perfectly capable of holding up the ivy. Well, that's English ivy. It's it's not, and it was an American white oak. Those 2 trees didn't evolve together to hold. The tree did not evolve to hold that ivy up. I can show you 15 dead trees in that area behind our house, in that wooded area that English ivy has killed. But there are trees that it evolved with that are capable of holding it up. So it's like, but it's not necessarily, but that's only certain trees that you could have that kind of stuff growing on and holding up. You'll see the same thing with like Chinese wisteria killing trees in the neighborhood. They just didn't evolve together. They're, it's a heavy thing to have on them, and it's shading them out and places for insects to hide and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I always thought that was some interesting comments I had gotten about cutting the ivy off that tree, because it is in fact killing the trees behind that oak tree. I don't even know where I was going with that. But anyway, yes, I don't let things grow up the trees, but I don't mind having ground covers right up to the base of trees. Okay, on the ground level. So somebody has 5-foot space between their driveway and some pavers in 6B, 7A. They were looking at planting a crepe myrtle or a red bud. If you're in zone 6B, a crepe myrtle frequently can be like a dieback perennial for you. So I don't know if that's, sometimes they'll stay up and, stay woody. But if you planted it and then had the wrong winter the first few years, it would just die to the ground and then maybe come back from the root. So the redbud overall is going to be more hardy for you in zone 6B. You can also look at that Tokyo Tower Kyananthus. They're just basically looking for a fastigiate tree, something tall and narrow for that space. I definitely would not plant a red maple in those spaces. We get a lot of that in the neighborhood. None of them look good with any age on them at all. Plus it gets wide and tall. There are several styrax, fastigiate styrax varieties as well that you might want to look at. And then I would get an ID app on your phone, and then as you're going around your neighborhood, wherever you live, if you're seeing other people have success with things in these kind of really difficult positions along the sidewalks and streets and driveways and those kinds of things, you might be able to identify some of those things with an ID app on your phone. Again, not knowing all the plants that necessarily grow in your neighborhood in zone 6B, wherever you are. Okay. When and how do you prune hellebore foliage? That was in a video like Wednesday or Thursday. I cut back just some garden task video. You may want to go back and take a look at that. But if you just searched on the channel for hellebore maintenance, I've got videos on hellebore maintenance. Virtually every year I show when to cut it back, but I cut it back as that new growth is starting to emerge in the middle or toward the end of January, typically. I do things a little earlier on the channel sometimes. Our foliage is still looking pretty good. We just haven't had temperatures that would have knocked it back. But even the stuff that hasn't been necessarily cold damage does look a little rough here and there. But it's always nice to cut them back. There's a lot of perennials that evergreen perennials, like evergreen ferns and other things, cast iron plants and other plants that look good with some pruning in this mid to late winter span. It makes room for this new fresh foliage to come up, or in the case of hellebores, the new flowers to come up and then the new foliage to emerge. Okay, should river birches be thinned to stay healthy, especially if the branching is really thick? Yeah, probably if you've got super, overlapping branches, any crossing branches, any of those kinds of things were probably good to take out. And they wanted to know when to prune it. We typically don't want to winter prune river birches. They're bleeder trees, and you may want to look this up if you're pruning trees as to when to prune trees, because there are certain trees, maples tend to go into this category as well. They don't heal over very well in the wintertime, and so what will happen in the spring is they start to re-pump moisture up into the tree to leaf out and get going. They'll just start, those wounds that you created from sawing or cutting or pruning, whatever tool you used, will not have healed over, and that water will start dripping out of that, or sap will start dripping out of those wounds. So a lot of those bleeder trees, it's typically late summer, early fall into early winter is the best time to do it. It's the time when, think about this, in the spring, it's pumping water up into the tree, right? Trying to grow new leaves, trying to grow new branches, trying to grow in size. And river birches are really, really good at outcompeting other trees. So are red maples and other maples. Sugar maples are great at putting on lots of growth in the spring, really, really quickly. And so their aim is to outcompete things for sunlight as fast as possible. Those trees are typically the ones you don't prune in the wintertime because the water will just come right out of them. But then as the summer comes on and then the late summer comes around, they actually start pulling moisture down back into the roots. And so that would be the time to prune them, when that moisture is going the other direction. And then it gives them time to heal over before they start pumping the water back up in the early spring or late winter. Okay, let's see. This person's in Western New York, Zone 6. Gardeners, farmers, growers love deep freezes for disease and insect control. What actually happens when the ground freezes? Well, some insects just don't hide well enough, when it freezes, and they do die off. So there's a lessening of numbers of insects, but the ones that get down into the ground far enough are well protected. Insects are incredibly well adapted at survival during winter months, as long as they've gotten themselves in a position to do so. But you will lose some in particularly cold winters. I don't know if it has any overall long-term impact on the numbers of insects or diseases in any particular area, but it may have a short-term, early spring impact before they build their numbers right back up. So that would be my, you know, but yes, it can kill, you know, it can kill some that just didn't hide themselves well. Okay. So somebody asked my opinion on mulch against the house. I get this question all the time for termites or whatever. I've mulched against my, I think obviously one thing would be all about the house, right, that you're in. If you have a house on slab and you have wood that's really close to the ground, you know, that may be part of your thought process. But I mean, the last house I was in had a brick foundation that was, I think at the lowest point, probably 1.5 feet of brick above the ground, and then at its highest point, 3 to 4 feet of brick. The house I'm currently in has a cinder block foundation, and it's, you know, I don't think there's a spot on that cinder block foundation where the wood is within 2 feet of the ground all the way around it. So I don't think, you know, for us, it's just not something I'm going to worry about. But again, it's so funny because all of this concern about mulch and pine straw, anything else up against the foundation, the only spot I've ever had termites in anything ever was the wood frame door on my garage door at the house, and it was on concrete. So just having the wood down near the ground was the actual issue, and you know, where they had easy access to it. But it was on concrete. So if I said, hey, yeah, don't mulch against your house, just put a concrete pad all the way around it, that won't change anything. Because that's actually the only place I got termites at my old house, was just in the bottom of a board that was near the ground. So I think it's more about not having those materials, you know, near the ground as much as anything. And then honestly, I'm defending my house, you know, so this channel's certainly not, we're not talking about chemicals out in the garden and, you know, poisoning, you know, things outside, but I'm not going to let termites in the house. So there is, you know, there is that, you know, having some sort of pest control plan. But I do think it's more about having a break between the wood and that you're using as mulch and your wood on your house. Okay, somebody has a new puppy. Is there a list of plants to avoid because of them being poisonous to dogs? I would, you know, the NC State site has, if you search any plant on the North Carolina State University plant database site, they have the severity, poison severity thing up at the top on every plant. And so if you're concerned, it's all about whether the dog chews on stuff or not. You know, there are plenty of, I mean, hellebores are in that poisonous category, but nothing eats them. I mean, deer don't eat them. Deer are smart enough not to eat them. Rabbits don't eat them. Probably my dog is not going to eat them. I mean, these animals are pretty sharp at figuring out, you know, what they can and can't, that can and can't eat most of the time. But there are some dogs that are just chew. And if you have that dog, then you're going to want to, you know, use that NC State list. And, you know, I would look for it as severity. Some of them, you know, like oleander, which, you know, if I look out this door right now, there's literally an oleander to my left over here, down here in Florida, very poisonous. It's got a sap inside of it, and it'd be a weird one for anything to want to eat. Really, it's like a glue almost inside of it. It'd be strange if something wanted to chew on it, but it's possible. But that plant's going to be on the North Carolina State list, as all parts of the plant are extremely poisonous. Those are the ones you're going to want to avoid. Some of them just cause, if you eat enough of anything, it's going to cause some reaction, and some of them are just going to be mild poison. You can just decide based on that, because your dog's probably going to have to eat a lot of it to have any kind of issue whatsoever. But there is you know, NC State does a pretty good job with that. But Holly just has never chewed on anything. Griffin really, I mean, he's out there trying to eat the broccoli stems and a few other things like that, but he's not really a chewer either. So luckily for us, it's not something we have to think about. Okay, somebody asked, I referenced a book on conifers for the Southeast, and it's Landscaping with Conifers and Ginkgos for the Southeast is the actual name of it. And Tom Cox and John Reuter wrote that book together. If you go back on the channel, you can see us visit Tom Cox shortly before he passed away. It was great to be able to make that visit down there and do that video with him at his place. And then we've also visited with Dr. John Reuter at UGA for some of his plant breeding that he has going on at the UGA field trial area at Georgia. And we may try to get up with Dr. Reuter again this spring, because we're going to be doing a trip down to Athens at that time, hopefully doing some content with Dr. Durr. I talked to him at I did talk to him at Mance, and others, and Dr. Armitage as well, but and of course Ram and Tom's garden. That book is a great reference because they truly tried everything. I think Tom tried every conifer that he could find, and just tried to disprove or prove whether or not they could be grown in Georgia, just above Atlanta, in Zone 7B, Zone 8A. And so it is a good reference book on the toughest of the tough conifers, and then the ginkgos are included in that as well. He had a great ginkgo collection at his place as well. So somebody asked from the water management 5-minute video, do we have special considerations at downspouts? Should we select plants that absorb or withstand extra water? If those spaces stay wet between watering, certainly there's sides of your house where you're going to need to think about plants that you either have to mound them up some or plant plants that are more adaptable to changing soil conditions. And a lot of times that's native plants. I mean, a lot of our natives to North Carolina are plants. I mean, people grow Itea on banks to hold banks in place, but when we see them in the wild, they're actually in the water. And there's a lot of plants like that. So a lot of our native shrubs are very well adapted to going through periods of dry and wet. So that may be something you use. We don't have downspouts on the house. We're lucky, intentionally living in a small house. And we really don't have to have gutters on the house. Gutters can help protect, the eaves and overhangs and those kinds of things by getting water, off and down to the ground. They can also do damage to the house if you don't clean the leaves out of them. We got a few people around the neighborhood with things growing in their gutters and holding leaves up on their roofs, and I'm sure it's doing more damage than it would if they didn't have the gutters in that case. But when you have large square footage houses with the bigger downspouts coming down, those do end up, you're going to have runoff off of your property in all likelihood. Once you start to consolidate the water into really, basically a fire hose of water, it's going to be difficult to keep that water on your property, but you can continue to improve the soil and, use maybe some rocks around those downspouts to try to slow that water down some. You're just trying to slow it down so you can get some of it in the ground before it does leave your property. Okay, let's see, that was number 15. Somebody is in Columbia, South Carolina, Zone 8B. They have osmanthus as a foundation plant. Less leaves on the bottom of them, and or limbed up, obstructing windows. Will they be okay to cut back nearly to the ground? Yeah, old established osmanthus almost all species could be cut back to the ground, and they'll come back out of that. You have to determine, though, keep in mind, when plants reach a certain amount of time in the ground, they come back really fast from pruning them back. And so you'll have to determine, you can give them a shot at pruning them to the ground, but you may find that they respond really quickly and come back within a couple years, and it may be time for something else in that spot, and maybe something that will stay below those windows for many more years than osmanthus, because most osmanthus get quite big. Even slower growing variegated ones like goshiki, can ultimately end up 10 feet, 12 feet tall in the future. Let's see. So somebody's an 8B, 9A, they're hydrangea macrophyllus or big leaf hydrangeas, still had leaves on them and then they were hit by sudden cold. Would it help them to wind down if they started to remove the leaves manually in November, or would this do further damage? Keep in mind the plants pull energy from those leaves that they collected all year back into their roots going into the winter time, and you're just in a place where the system doesn't work properly, so the plant's not really getting that energy out of those leaves back down into the ground. I don't think picking them off is going to to change anything. You're better off with that, ultimately, as much of that energy from those leaves getting back down into the roots as possible. It's just, again, 8B, 9A is not the best place to grow a hydrangea macrophylla necessarily, nor Zone 5 a lot of times, because the cold kills the flower buds. So it's like there's a sweet spot in between those two places. How do the furry family members handle travel? Where is their favorite place? Well, Holly is any place with a beach, and we did not know Holly has never had a bath I think maybe I gave her like one because she rolled in deer poop or something a long time ago, but she just popped her head up when I said that. She never needed one. She doesn't, it's weird. She sheds and it doesn't matter what kind of conditions she goes in or walks through, she never smells bad. Griffin can kind of fairly get fairly funky over a period of time if he goes out and plays in a lot of stuff. So we thought he hates the bath, and so we thought he didn't like water. It turns out, if you let him go, he'll jump right in the ocean and start playing. So we found that out this year. Then he's actually a water dog, big time water dog, and loves playing in the water. But they both like the beach. We were running on the beach the other day in St. Augustine. That St. Augustine beach is a great place for us to go because Holly can get to the beach. From where we stay, Holly can get to the beach easily and spend some time over there. In terms of how well they travel, Holly's, it's not at the top of her list, the actual driving part. I mean, she's not, it's not terrible, but it's not clearly, she always has a bit of a, I would call it, I don't know what I would call the face that she always has, which is, why aren't we doing the thing that we're supposed to be doing at this exact time of the day? If you're doing something different than that or out of order from that, she looks like she's concerned. She has a concerned resting face, let's call it that. And it always looks like she's concerned about everything. And then you get there and she has a blast. So we're down here in the Keys, it's 68 degrees-ish, sun's out. She can walk out here without it being too much of a stress on her. So, they both love the destination. Griffin, on the other hand, crawls up in a corner. You can drive for 6 or 7 hours. You don't even know he's here. And when he gets there, he fires out and has a great time. So he's one of the best traveling dogs I've ever had, for sure. Again, it doesn't matter if Holly's traveling or not. If you're just doing something different, she's concerned. Okay. Have we won the battle against Bermuda grass in our garden? How long did it take? We still have a little bit of Bermuda grass. When I was pulling out the annuals in a video like a month ago now, some of the dead annuals from last winter, I found some Bermuda grass that I was trying to pull up through the annual bed then. It was hidden under some annuals. So we still have a couple patches of it here or there. So we're 4.5 years now or whatever it's been, and we're still got a couple spots of Bermuda grass here or there that, the problem is during the season, this is the one thing I would say spray, right? I don't say spray very often, but when we're dealing with Bermuda grass, you're best to spray it, but I can't spray it if it's in an annual bed during the season. So, and then it's dormant in the winter when the annual bed's empty. So I'm just trying to find all the runners and pull it up out of the annual bed as best as I can. Okay, this person's in Raleigh with improved rich soil. They're supposed medium-sized perennials get tall and floppy, and they don't fertilize much. They were asking how to make some of my soil areas leaner, and I don't think you'll definitely necessarily make them leaner. I would just say stop adding so much organic material to them so that some of that stuff can have a time to break down a little bit, and so that they're not pushing the plants as hard. All this compost and even wood chips having broken down, and all this, any fertilizing we're doing can make some of our native plants that actually prefer growing in some leaner soil stretch, grow too fast, flop over, that kind of thing. Again, I will throw out, hopefully they're getting enough sun. I mean, obviously, I'm not there, so I'm assuming you're saying that they're in full sun and they don't fertilize all that much, but probably it's easy. It's weird. There's a sweet spot here where I'm trying to improve the soil where the vast majority of things are going to thrive in that, but I'm probably going to overdo it for some other things that don't want the soil that rich. Or I'm going to underdo stuff that really likes rich soil. You know what I mean? Like there's no spot where I'm going to get it all right. I'm just trying to improve it in general. But I do find that our perennials out by the street in the leaner soil, in the tougher, what looks like much tougher conditions, tend to be sturdier plants overall. So somebody just said how to begin to clean up after a big wind, rain, of ice event that's broken tree branches and stuff like that. I always say it's most important thing first is to make sure that nothing else is going to get damaged by the things that are there. So the first thing is to get the heavy stuff out of the way and make sure you're not going to get hurt working out there, make sure that other plants aren't going to continue to get damaged. They're not going to continue to do damage to themselves if they're leaning over. Things need to get staked, and all those kinds of things that you're preventing you getting injured or the plants taking additional injury. Those are definitely at the top of my list in the order of operations. Did I have an industrial wood chipper as a nurseryman? One of the earliest videos from the garden in Raleigh, I had my big wood chipper in one of those videos. I ended up selling it. And then qualities to look for in a business wood chipper. So for me, I will say that almost everything I bought as a landscaper toward the end of my landscape years had a Honda motor on it. So I got to the point where I was like, well, something, I had a Honda tiller that I sold when I was selling off the garden center that had not been cranked in 2 to 3 years. I don't want to exaggerate this, but over 2 years. And landscaper friend of mine, I had said, hey man, I got a Honda tiller, but I haven't cranked it in a couple years. I would have, if you're interested in it. And he did need a tiller at the time. And he came over and we literally put gas in it. And I think the second pull, that thing cranked up. And I was like, because something like a wood chipper like this is going to go periods of time where it's not going to be running. And so spend the extra dollars and get something with a small Honda engine on it. It's always been my, that was always my go-to. By the end of my time working with small engines, and I actually got hired originally at the garden center I worked at as a small engine repair person because I had grown up in a wrecker business and had turned a few wrenches, and so that was the reason I was originally hired. So I had a lot of experience working on small engine stuff, but it's nicer when you don't have to work on them. That's kind of my thought on it. So spend a few extra dollars and get a Honda. Last question for this week. This person has a hung long maple near the house with morning sun. As it grows, it's moving towards getting afternoon sun. Heard they don't like that. They don't like the heat of the south. They're in the Pacific Northwest though, in Portland. Will it be an issue for them? I think if your maple is choosing, if it starts off in the park shade, hung long maple's an evergreen maple that we have one of them in our garden. It's beautiful. I'm sure we'll show it during the upcoming growing season. But if you're in the Pacific Northwest, I think yours is going to be able to take more sun, direct sun, than mine is in the southeast in all likelihood. But and if it's choosing to put its leaves up there, it'll be fine. It's interesting how plants can kind of adapt to full sun or choose to be in full sun. But a lot of times it's where the plant was grown in a nursery situation where it was in part sun, and then we take it home, put it in the full sun, and it burns, or we underwater it and it didn't have enough moisture in the leaves and it burned, and then we assume that it won't take full sun. But if it has its roots shaded and then gets itself up into the full sun, it'll probably be fine in the Pacific Northwest, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. So again, ask gardening questions down in the comment section below the video. There are discounts for the weekly garden planner and the Learn to Garden video series, which are getting lots of new content during the year. And there are t-shirts available over on the website, and the tickets for the open garden are on the website as well. Thank you guys for watching.